Picture this, you're walking along the Nile River 4,000 years ago, and suddenly a massive bull charges past you, twice the size of any cow you've ever seen. A lion roars from the nearby reeds. Hippos are causing absolute chaos in the water. A sandy-coloured antelope with curved horns grazes peacefully nearby. And overhead, a giant heron the size of a person takes flight. This isn't some fever dream. This was just Tuesday in ancient Egypt. But today, most of these incredible animals are gone forever. What's up everyone? Today we're diving into the lost world of ancient Egypt, but we're not talking about pyramids or mummies. We're talking about the incredible animals that shared the land with the pharaohs. Animals so important they literally became gods, and animals that have completely vanished from our world. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at Egyptian hieroglyphs the same way again. Let's start with the absolute units, the animals that would make you question your life choices if you met them in person. The Aurochs. Remember that charging bull I mentioned? That was an Auroch, basically a regular bull's older, angrier, and much bigger brother. These things stood 6 feet tall and weighed as much as a small car. The Egyptians were so impressed by their raw power that pharaohs literally had themselves painted hunting these beasts just to show off. It was like the ancient equivalent of posting your gym selfies, except instead of lifting weights, you're taking down a prehistoric super cow with a spear. The Aurochs represented pure strength and dominance, which is exactly what every pharaoh wanted to project. Unfortunately, the last Aurochs died in 1627, so we'll never get to see one of these magnificent monsters in person. North African elephants. There used to be elephants casually strolling through North Africa. Not just any elephants, but their own unique subspecies. The Egyptians hunted them, traded with them, and later, these same elephant populations would be captured by Carthage and turned into ancient war machines. Imagine Hannibal crossing the Alps, but the elephants he's using are descendants of the same herds that once drank from the Nile. By Roman times though, they'd been hunted into oblivion. The Atlas bear. And if elephants in Africa sound crazy, how about bears? Yep, the Atlas Mountains were home to Africa's only native bear species. While they probably didn't hang out directly in Egypt, the Egyptians definitely knew about them through trade and tribute from neighbouring regions. They weren't your average teddy bears either. They were proper brown bears living in what we now think of as purely African territory. The Romans eventually hunted them to extinction for their gladiator games because apparently regular lions just weren't exciting enough anymore. But here's where it gets really interesting. Many of these animals weren't just part of daily life, they were literally worshipped as gods. Lions everywhere. Lions were absolutely everywhere in ancient Egypt, and I mean everywhere. The pharaohs didn't just hunt them for sport, though they definitely did that too. Lions were symbols of royal power and divine protection. Meet Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess, who was basically the ancient Egyptian version of Don't Mess With Me. She was the goddess of war, healing, and righteous fury. When the Egyptians wanted to show ultimate power, they carved lion heads on their temples and sphinxes. The specific lions they knew, Barbary lions with their magnificent dark manes, were unfortunately hunted to extinction in the wild. Today, you can only find their bloodline in a few captive populations. The Hippo Paradox. Now this is fascinating. Hippos were simultaneously feared and revered. On one hand, they represented chaos and destruction. The god Set, who murdered Osiris, was often depicted as a hippo. These things were genuinely terrifying. Imagine a 3-ton animal with teeth like railroad spikes that could bite a crocodile in half. But plot twist, they also had Taweret, a pregnant hippo goddess who protected women during childbirth. So basically, the same animal that represented death also protected new life. By 1000 BCE, they'd hunted all the hippos out of Egypt, but you can still see them carved into temple walls, frozen in stone as reminders of when the Nile was a much more dangerous place. The mystery of the Bennu Bird. Here's where things get mystical. The Egyptians told stories about a divine bird called the Bennu, a massive heron that was supposedly the soul of the sun god Ra. Every morning when the sun rose, this bird's cry would literally herald the dawn of creation itself. Here's the incredible part. We've actually found fossils of a giant heron species that used to live along the Nile. Was the Bennu bird based on a real animal? Did the ancient Egyptians actually see these enormous herons and turn them into the prototype for the phoenix? The Bennu heron was estimated to have reached over 2 meters tall, making it about the height of a tall human or even taller. Some sources specifically mention it could have stood up to nearly 7 feet tall with a wingspan of almost 9 feet. However, this size estimate is based on only a single partial leg bone, so the size estimates are somewhat speculative. The remains were found at the al-Nar archaeological site in the United Arab Emirates and date to around 2700 to 1800 BCE. Some animals weren't gods to the Egyptians. They were luxury items, status symbols, and hunting companions. Cheetahs, the ancient sports cars. Forget horses. If you were a wealthy Egyptian, you hunted with cheetahs. These big cats were tamed and used like hunting dogs, appearing in tomb paintings as elegant, spotted companions to the elite. Think about how extra that is. Your hunting buddies aren't dogs or falcons. They're literally the fastest land animals on Earth. As Egypt became more desert and less savanna, cheetahs gradually disappeared from the region. Ostriches, the ultimate fashion statement. Ostriches were the ancient Egyptian equivalent of designer handbags. Their feathers were woven into fans, used in royal crowns, and buried with pharaohs as symbols of truth and justice. Their eggs were so prized they've been found in tombs as grave goods. The goddess Maat, who weighed hearts against truth in the afterlife, wore an ostrich feather in her hair. So literally, the feather of truth came from these big flightless birds that used to run around the Egyptian desert. Giraffes, the ultimate diplomatic gift. Picture this scene. You're a pharaoh sitting on your throne and suddenly your envoys return from Nubia with the most bizarre animal you've ever seen. It's like someone took a horse and stretched it through a taffy machine with a neck so long it can eat leaves from trees no other animal can reach. Giraffes were so exotic they appear in tribute scenes. They were literally diplomatic gifts that said, "Our lands are so abundant, we have animals that look like they were designed by committee." The sacred antelopes. But here's where the story gets even more incredible. The Egyptians didn't just hunt antelopes, they turned them into the backbone of their civilization. The Bubal Hartebeest. The Bubal Hartebeest was not just another antelope that happened to live in Egypt. This was the antelope of ancient Egypt. Picture a sandy-coloured antelope with beautiful U-shaped horns, standing about as tall as a large deer. The ancient Egyptians didn't just hunt these animals, they literally domesticated them. We're talking about 4,000 years ago when the Egyptians were turning wild antelopes into livestock, long before most other civilizations figured out basic agriculture. But here's what makes this story incredible. The Bubal Hartebeest was so important to Egyptian culture that they created a specific hieroglyph just for baby hartebeest. They used these animals in religious sacrifices and raised entire herds of them. The animal was even mentioned in the Old Testament as a kosher animal called yachmer. Ancient writers like Herodotus described massive herds of 100 to 200 animals roaming across North Africa. The name Bubalus that the Greeks and Romans used? That's literally where our word buffalo comes from, even though this was actually an antelope. Now here's the tragic part. This animal that was so central to one of humanity's greatest civilizations went extinct in 1925. Not 1825, not some distant prehistoric time, 1925. People alive today had grandparents who could have seen the last wild Bubal Hartebeest. The final herd of just 15 animals was found in Morocco in 1917. One hunter killed all but 3 of them in a single expedition. The very last one was shot in Algeria in 1925. An animal that has survived alongside pharaohs for thousands of years was wiped out in the span of a human lifetime. The Scimitar-Horned Oryx, the original unicorn. And speaking of sacred antelopes, meet the Scimitar-Horned Oryx, an animal so important it was literally the emblem of an entire Egyptian province. These elegant antelopes with their curved sword-like horns weren't just admired by the Egyptians, they were domesticated and used in religious ceremonies. Here's a mind-blowing fact. The Scimitar-Horned Oryx might actually be the inspiration for unicorn legends. When seen from the side, especially if one horn was broken, these animals could look like they had a single horn. Ancient Greeks and Romans definitely thought so. The god Set was sometimes depicted as an oryx, and these animals animals appear constantly in Egyptian art. They were perfectly adapted for desert life. They could go months without drinking water, surviving on the moisture from plants alone. But here's another recent tragedy. The Scimitar-Horned Oryx was declared extinct in the wild in the year 2000. Think about that. An animal that inspired Egyptian gods and possibly unicorn legends was wiped out just 25 years ago. Fortunately, there's a happy ending here. Captive breeding programs have been so successful that they've recently reintroduced small herds back to the wild in Chad. Not all of Egypt's animals were cuddly companions or status symbols. Some were genuinely terrifying. Nile crocodiles, the living gods. Imagine trying to get water from the Nile, knowing that at any moment a 16-foot crocodile could explode out of the water and ruin your entire day. The Egyptians dealt with this by doing what they did best. They turned the crocodiles into a god. Meet Sobek, the crocodile-headed god of the Nile's power and fertility. They built entire temples to honor crocodiles, mummified them when they died, and even kept sacred crocodiles decorated with gold jewelry. It was like having a pet dinosaur, except the dinosaur could actually eat you. The crocodiles are mostly gone from northern Egypt now, pushed south by development and hunting, but their legacy lives on in countless carvings and mummies. And finally, we have one of ancient Egypt's greatest zoological mysteries, the Set animal. This creature appears constantly in Egyptian art and hieroglyphs, but here's the thing, no modern zoologist can identify what it actually was. It has a long, curved snout, upright rectangular ears, a forked tail, and a body that's sort of canine but not quite. Some think it's a stylized jackal, others believe it might be based on an extinct species we've never found fossils of. The Set animal was associated with chaos, storms, and the desert, basically everything that threatened Egyptian civilization. Was it a real animal that went extinct so long ago we've lost all trace of it? Or was it always mythological? The mystery continues to baffle experts today. So there you have it, the incredible lost world of ancient Egyptian animals, from massive aurochs that dwarfed modern cattle, to sacred antelopes that were domesticated 4,000 years ago, to animals that went extinct within living memory, to mysterious creatures that might have been entirely mythical. These weren't just animals to the Egyptians, they were gods, status symbols, hunting companions, livestock, and the foundation of their economy. Many are gone forever, wiped out by hunting, climate change, and human expansion. Others have retreated to distant corners of Africa, shadows of their former glory. But here's the beautiful thing, the Egyptians preserved these animals forever in stone and paint and story. Every hieroglyph, every temple carving, every myth is like a time capsule, showing us a world where humans and incredible wildlife lived side by side. The most heartbreaking part? Some of these connections to ancient Egypt were only broken in the last 100 years. The Bubal Hartebeest that pharaohs domesticated went extinct in 1925. The Scimitar-Horned Oryx that inspired gods was declared extinct in the wild in 2000. We're not talking about some distant prehistoric past, we're talking about animals that our great-grandparents could have seen alive. The next time you see Egyptian art, remember, you're not just looking at decoration, you're looking at the ghosts of animals that once walked beside the pharaohs, some of which vanished from our world just decades ago. What extinct animal would you most want to see in person? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey through ancient Egypt's lost wildlife, make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories from history.